Hello, everyone. Welcome to Middle Fantasy, the show where I talk about science fiction and fantasy. I am your host, Zack, and today we are continuing kind of having discussion talks, but we're doing something a little differently. I'm actually joined by my friend Fran. How are you doing today?
I am doing good, mate. How are you doing yourself?
Doing good. Wildfires were near here, so I felt like, California is where Hades is supposed to be, so I was just like, it's supposed to be, down there, not up here.
Yeah, I think the fire got confused as to where it was meant to be and just got a little lost.
No,
Um,
Persephone was doing some rearranging and accidentally forgot, like, a volcano or something.
she was dusting off the wrong volcano and it just it went.
Yeah, pretty much. But today we're doing something a little differently, and that is we're going to be like armchair podcast people today. Like we usually do like Percy Jackson stuff as podcasts, but today we're doing like armchair like live TV executives, and this is kind of weird to me. But so today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about the first season of The Lightning Thief. It's going to be on Disney Plus. We know literally nothing about it other than that it's going to be here, to be on Disney Plus, and that Rick Riordan and all of them are going to be working on it and having a hand on it. But we are going to be talking about it, but like, what would we do for a series? What would we do for the first season? Because they have their ideas and we have ours, and we just sit here in our little recording booths and be like, what works and what doesn't? Let me just get comfortable really quickly in my armchair. Ah. But before we begin that, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself, Fran?
Yes, no, that's great. So I am Fran of the YouTube channel A Healthy Dose of Fran, where I do such content as Avatar, Legend of Korra, Rights of Kyoshi, theory videos and discussion videos alongside Percy Jackson content as well, although fading out of that on YouTube slightly, but hopefully I will be getting to that soon. But if you are still looking for Percy Jackson, I also run a podcast where I do deep dive analyses and bring up a lot of opinions about the books that many people do not agree with, but it's fun all the same, over on the Best Damn Camp. And yes, it is Damn, DAM, because I, like Percy Jackson, am rather punny. Um,
Yeah, we're both really into Percy Jackson. Actually, that's kind of how we've met because I was doing Radio Camp Half Blood, and we kind of just trickled, and all the, Percy Jackson community just started to like mold together in this way of like the podcasting community. So
oh,
this is going
yeah.
to be interesting because both of us are almost like same brain, even though you're across the pond. Actually, I think yeah, it's this way. We pretty much are like hand in hand with a lot of opinions. So this is going
Oh,
to be
yeah.
exciting. Now the twist is neither of us has told each other what we have ideas planned for this. So this is going to be interesting. So Fran, why don't you kick it off first, since you're our guest?
All right. Okay. So the way in which I've kind of gone about things with this is firstly looking, because obviously that our whole plan was to have it that it was maximum we were going to have 8 episodes set out for the Disney Plus. Um, I regret agreeing to that the moment I started planning out the episode. So I was like, this is not possible. No. So it took me a lot longer than I thought it would to figure out how to separate all the information that we have in The Lightning Thief and kind of figure out the things that were more important to put into 8 episodes and what was more important to the later stories as well. So the way in which I figured out doing it to make sure that there was enough information was looking at the episodes sort of being similar enough to in length to usual programs and a little bit longer than normal Disney Plus and Disney Channel TV shows, which are usually like 25 to 28 minutes. And I made this around 35 to 40 minutes, which they're kind of stretching towards a little bit more so in shows that have more sort of adventure and not like adult themes, like not like Mandalorian level sort of watch, but closer enough to that. That was like, I feel we can get enough adventure and action into it than you would with the normal 25, 28 minutes that they've had before. So with that, I then had to like list out all the things. So I was like, okay, what is important? And from that, I kind of dived into figuring out how the episodes would work, but focusing on what I considered to be most important about the series.
Now, what in
And
your opinion is the most important of the series?
oh, okay. So this some of these things may be slightly controversial, but this one definitely isn't. The first one I put in. To me, it's the importance of Sally and Percy's relationship. specifically in this first season, because obviously the whole reason why he's going on his quest to figure out who the lightning thief is, to go find the lightning bolt and all these sort of things, is because of his mum. And this is the thing that I always had an issue with like the films that shall not be named, for example, in that we don't even learn Sally's name in the film, and we don't hear her speak really. I think we hear her name once and we assume that that's her.
Yeah, in the movie she's more like just the MacGuffin, like, okay, this is why the person has to go on the quest. It's like reverse fridging in this way of like, well, it's like she isn't dead. Actually, I guess, yeah, she kind of is fridged a little bit, but not really. But, you know, they go on their quest, and it's like, this is why Percy goes on it, but there's no motivation in the movie whatsoever.
Yeah, because it's not like, we don't know who this woman is. You know she's his mother, but that's it. So we don't actually care about her. Whereas in the books, we've gotten to know her a little bit more. Like, we've had some more interactions with her before they go on like their trip to Montauk and stuff like that. And then later on, she's like heroic to help save Percy and Grover, and that's why she disappears in that cloud of dust, because of the Minotaur. She's sort of sacrificed. She's shown as a hero, whereas in the film, she's just a damsel in distress. And I was like, why? So I want to focus on that particular, as well as the fact that Sally is just a beautiful human being in the series. Sally Jackson is the best. I think that's just the thing in general. And she has a huge role later on in the books also, which I think is why we need to like build on that significance in the first season. So having the scenes between her and Percy in the early bits, like them going to Montauk and her involvement in his life, and her knowing obviously everything about him and who Poseidon was, and knowing that one day he would have to go to the camp, and her holding on for dear life because she doesn't want him to. I felt that was something that was important to hold on to. And then another one that's not too controversial is the bond and like the building of the relationship between our main trio of Percy Jackson, Annabeth Chase, and Grover Underwood.
Yeah, no, most definitely when it comes to that, because it's a trio, it's an ensemble piece, but people always go to, well, no, it's technically a couple, but it's like, no, it's three people. Grover's off there in the bushes to the side.
Yeah. I don't think that's the thing. It's definitely that, like, whenever people think of the main characters from Percy Jackson, it's only ever like Percy and Annabeth that are mentioned. Like, Grover is hardly ever mentioned. So that's what I think TV series wise.
It's like the Mike Wazowski thing of like, they'll have like the Disney Plus logo like slowly appear over Grover.
Oh my god, literally. That is the best description. He has the sticker over his face, but he's happy he's just there in general. Because he's such an angel. But I think that's something that I would definitely want like built on in the show, just so people can't forget him. Like, he's so ever present that they can't forget him, and also kind of build up his importance a little bit as well. Like, he is important in the book, but I always felt like he came across as that sort of like cries at everything, kind of a little bit useless character.
He's kind of like the Shaggy. He's like, I don't know, Scoob, zoinks.
Exactly, yeah. And like, considering he is strong as well, and he's like a good emotional support for Percy, and you know, has really big moments also in general. I feel like it would be great to have that built on in the first season also. So also, not only is he not forgotten, but he just has some of those standout moments. Because I think the side characters do need to have their standout moments as well, because just to sort of flesh them out. So yeah, main trio.
And he's also like, when it comes to like Grover, it's like he's also a character that's very like loyal to like a fault, and you have especially like, whereas like Annabeth isn't like that, like she wavers quite a bit. But like when it comes to Grover, he's almost like the glue that holds them all together. He's the constant in all the bickering between Annabeth and Percy throughout that entire quest.
Oh yeah, definitely, because he's the one who also like gives that insight to Percy a little bit as well. Like, you know, you kind of need to lay off Annabeth a little bit because she's been through a lot, and then we don't see it, but we get the intention that he's doing something similar with Annabeth as well when they have a few kind of conversation moments together. So I think that's something that would be great to see, just him being sort of that peacemaker sort of person, like him having that important role in the group, being kind of visible in the series. And the next one, this is one, again, I said this was going to be so controversial, but I think it's the later ones. These first ones aren't controversial at all. They're just...
It's like a tier system. Yeah. It's a little bit of a tier system.
Yeah. So the next one is the Kronos and Ares storyline. Because obviously, None of that is in the films, except for the second film. But even then, the Ares bit isn't involved. It's just weird. But the Kronos and Ares part of the Lightning Thief are like integral to the series as a whole. If you don't bring in the Kronos bit, you can't have any of the further storylines, because then you'd have to figure out how to bring him in suddenly in another book. And then the Ares point, admittedly, Ares technically doesn't have to be a significant point to it, but the aspects and the role that he plays of like having the demigods in this, and especially Percy, question the gods' strength and their intelligence and their role in the world. Having Ares fill that role, I think, is really important for that sort of dynamic between Percy and Luke.
Especially when it comes to that's like the first guy they actually meet that's really quote unquote like godly. I mean, they meet Dionysus, but pretty much Ares is the first one they meet, and he's also the most fallible out of all of them. Like, he's the first one that makes all the mistakes. And then once you see with like Poseidon and everyone else, it's like, okay, things are coming into place. He isn't as like the most extreme out of all of them. He's like out of them like the most subtle.
Yeah. And it's such an interesting moment to kind of see firsthand what the gods are like, and also have it not be that positive experience as well with Ares. Like, he is exactly what would lead to a demigod choosing the other side, because he's full of himself, he is cruel, he is manipulative, and he's not shy about it. And so having that aspect, I think, is important, especially for the whole Percy and Luke relationship, which is where my next bit comes in, which I don't think it will be controversial, but I feel like some people won't agree with it. And that's the building completely on the relationship between Percy and Luke. More so when the prophecy comes out, the whole betrayed by a friend aspect of the thing. They have like a single scene in the book, and yet Luke is the betrayed by a friend, and I'm like,
yeah. See, technically there's like two, because there's the part where they go to the car wash and like he like talks to him.
Yeah.
It's almost like they become like hi bye friends for a second. It's not really a true friend. Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember seeing that, and I think I talked about it on my podcast as well, and I was like, is he a friend though? They didn't.
No, I mean, if it's like you're going to be betrayed by a casual acquaintance.
Yeah, I don't think that works as well.
Wait a second, that doesn't rhyme.
So in that sort of case, to kind of have that moment, and also the portrayal for us, the audience, like the people who'll be going into this show who may not have read the books, who are watching that, not realizing that Luke is obviously the villain in this case, that betrayal will feel so much more painful if we've gotten to know Luke and kind of seen him in a friendly light and seen his treatment and kindness towards Percy, to then have that do a full 180 when like he nearly tries to kill Percy and all these sort of things. That's going to have such a big impact that when the next time we see him in like the following seasons, there's going to be that building, rising resentment and anger towards him. But then also having that moment of the fact that Percy is also someone who is loyal to like his dad and the gods, but does question them a lot because of their behavior, which is something that Luke plays on here and there. So having that relationship built up, I think, will work to having us understand a little bit more as to where Luke is coming from also, which I think is something that's never played up.
Yeah, it's like from a certain point of view, like Percy and Luke are pretty much the exact same person, except they're just different sides of the spectrum of who you're for with that argument.
Yeah, it's sort of like the whole, they took the opposite path. So like Luke went down the full resentment side, whereas Percy looked and kind of didn't like do the turn.
He's compromising.
Sort of thing. Yeah, he's compromising. Like, I know they're not great, but hopefully I can help change that in some way. Whereas Luke's like, no, we will murder them all. Like that is the only option here.
Yeah, it's like it's like peace through force a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a lot better than what I said.
Yeah.
And then I think the final bit for it, the thing that I consider important, not I guess not really important, but something that I think will help the storyline in general for like the episodes, is cutting down on the monsters and the monster fights.
Oh man, we're pretty much like our list room was very similar in many ways. So this is interesting. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I think the ones that I kind of get me is like, that the Krusties
Oh my
scene, or
god, that's the one that I was okay. That's
I
like the first
hate
one.
that scene so much. Like in the
Okay, I
book,
didn't
I
mean
hate it. I
I
would
didn't mean
cut
to
that
yell, but it's
out.
like that's like in my mind. I'm like, okay, that's the first thing that's got to go.
Yeah, that's the
It's
first thing that goes. And honestly, I'd slightly probably get rid of the Lotus Casino scene as well.
See, I feel like okay, when we get into it, I feel like when it comes to that, they should have it, but they need to have it for the one moment where you have the cameo between Nico and Bianca, where you just see them for a second, but they almost is like a just like a one-off joke.
Yeah, was it? I don't know. Obviously I'm in the UK. I haven't seen the musical. Do they make a reference to that in the musical? Like what? Yeah.
Because they ask
So,
them, they go to, and it's like, oh, you know, you like, don't you know anything about like the Lotus Eaters? Like, no. Excuse me, miss. What year is it? Oh, it's May 1st, 1939, and it's her and
yeah,
her
yeah,
brother.
yeah.
That's just like if you didn't know who they were, you wouldn't. It wouldn't matter.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So something like that. So like a reference to it, but not them, not the whole, the timeline needs to be sped up suddenly. We're gonna put them somewhere so that can happen, so there's more drama. Like have them maybe see it and kind of maybe do that sort of thing that they do in the musical where they bump into someone and find out the year and they're like, all right, okay, I'm done. Let's go.
When it comes like to the monsters, I've always thought of them much like the same way as like lightsabers and proton packs, and how they're good in moderations, but if you go like excessively, it becomes boring. You keep to the heavy hitters. You keep with like Medusa. You keep with like the Fates. You keep with Cerberus. You keep with all like the heavy hitters because the first book is pretty much all the heavy hitters, and then slowly starts to get weird. Is that's kind of like how it should be. It's like you make them precise, and even like when it comes to like the Chimera, like those should almost be like the showstopper scenes. But like getting rid of like Krusty and like even like the water park scene isn't really necessary a little bit.
Yeah, see, I've removed that as well. In the list that I've done as well for the episodes, I've had it that Ares doesn't send them on the quest. It's that he's kind of coming across a little bit arrogant and just like, hey, maybe I could just help a few demigods out, and just kind of gives them the gifts without expecting anything. So we ourselves as like the audience and like Percy and Annabeth have that sort of sense of, well, that's a bit weird, but kind of take it anyway because it's a god. Like, there can't be like any problems with the gifts from a god, can there?
Yeah,
Um,
no, most definitely when it comes to that.
yeah. But that's kind of the sort of thing. It's same with what you're saying. I just think depending on the episode length and the amount that we do get in the end as well, the amount of monster fights that, especially in the Lightning Thief, they kind of calm down in the later books a little bit, but it's still a bit much here and there. The Lightning Thief has the most monster fights, and most of them do not need to exist. Like the Chimera, I could kind of get rid of the Chimera fight because it doesn't really have much bearing on the storyline, other than the nymph in the water saying, "Hey, go to San Francisco," I think it
Yeah,
was,
San
or
Francisco.
yeah, and I'm like, that could happen somewhere else. Like that's the only reason why that sort of scene happens is for him to fall in the water and get that information. Like there's another way to feed that in other than having a monster fight. I think there were a few others, but I can't remember any of them now. The main ones I remember, I'm like, I can get rid of the Chimera and I can get rid of Krusty. That I'll be fine.
Okay, so for me, the first one I'm gonna put, I already know. I'm just gonna get this one right out of the way because I can already hear the pitchforks being sharpened. Is the first big thing that I want to change is making sure that it isn't just a romance story between Percy and Annabeth through the first book, because it's pretty much that's just their friendship, and not leaning into that ship of just having like that pandering type of thing of like will they won't they. You just keep them almost as friends, released in a way that where it's like subtle that they like kind of like each other, but then as the series goes on, you kind of lean into it a little more, but not focusing so much on the romance part first until they've established a relationship would probably be the most important thing, especially the relationship between Percy and everyone else in the camp, between like Clarice and him, or even like you said with like Luke. Like you have to make it so it's like they're not just there for the sake of just being in the plot. They need to be there and be almost relatable in that way. They actually feel like kids. That's why when it comes to things like casting and stuff, when it comes to kid actors, just let a casting agent figure that part out, and you make like the gods the ones that are like the A-list celebrities, rather than just finding like, oh, we're gonna have John Mulaney. Like he's like that guy's like almost in his 50s or something. I don't know how old he is, but like you can't have him as Percy. Hey, what's up, my fellow teens?
Oh, definitely. Oh my gosh. I have seen some quite interesting casting for the kids. Most people have been pretty all right with the aging, which is fine. John Mulaney, admittedly, I've seen a lot for people want him as Blackjack. They want him to voice Blackjack. That's the one thing I was like, that is the best casting choice I think I've ever seen.
Now, the other change that I think should happen is I think they should focus the first 3 episodes on almost Camp Half Blood and then go on the adventure, because the adventure part, when you really think about it, can go by very, very quickly. You can say that in
Like montage
shorthand
sort of
almost.
thing.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
even like the montage, but like you focus like the last 2 or 3 episodes on it, but you keep the majority of them establishing the camp, establishing the world and the rules, rather than when you go on the adventure, which I like it. Once you get to the road trip, it should focus almost like a road trip type of movie where they get lost and separated and they falter. But at the same time, you need to focus on Camp Half Blood because it's its own character in a way. Like you have to like really focus on that. And if you can't believe Camp Half Blood is like this weird camp with like volcano walls and like archery practice, you're not going to enjoy it. If we go back to the movie, it's just like rustic Hogwarts in a way, and it's just like, oh, we've been here a million times. Like it's not magical in that way. Rather than in the books, it's like this mismatch of cabins that don't quite mix together. You don't have like the weird silly wackiness of it. But once you focus on that as a character, and then you can go on the quest and you be like, okay, this is what we're fighting for, and this is what things are. You can have it in that way, and it might be a lot more fun than just the first episode. Percy wakes up and then has to go on the quest, and the rest of them are pretty much him going on the quest with everyone. Would get boring real quick.
Yeah. No, I agree. Especially the setup for Camp Half-Blood, considering its significance in like later books as well, definitely is something to do. And I think it's something Disney is going to go so hard on the budget of making Camp Half-Blood look amazing, because they are going to ham that up so much.
Yeah, I'm interested to see maybe if they're gonna do something almost like what they've been doing with like the Mandalorian, with like their projection screens and stuff, and like really just going to town on that, especially when it comes to like the set deck for that's going to be so much fun, because it's a summer camp, but yet it's like ancient Greek AF in many ways, but it has like this Americana to it, which I love.
Oh my gosh. I can just see them playing it up so much, because like as they've like done with the Mandalorian, obviously they've got bits of that to do at their parks now as well, like relating to it. They're going to do that specifically because they're going to be like, we can turn this into an amusement area in one of our parks, an entire section of a Camp Half-Blood camp.
There's actually a perfect place. I know exactly where it is. So there's a place in California Adventure that's it was like they made it for Brother Bear, like it was a Brother Bear like jungle gym area. It's called Red Rock Trails. I can't remember what it's called, but they changed it to like Wilderness Explorers for like up. I'm like, you could just turn that into Camp Half Blood, and you have this whole huge section, and you're good to go.
Oh, that sounds so good. Oh my gosh. That would be like the one reason we're like, okay, I'm gonna come back to America for a holiday just so I can go go see that. That would be like the one thing that'll bring me back to the US, other than work.
Fran, I actually have a question for you, and that is pretty much like you're as British as fish and chips. Now, when it comes to like the references and the jokes, I mean, in the Lightning Thief, they're very, very like American. A very like if you boil the Lightning Thief down, it's like the most Americana thing ever. When it comes to that, when it comes to the writing, what do you think about that? Especially, should they lean more into like the America road trip, or do you think it should be more universal for every kid in the whole world to experience?
I think it should be more universal in some form, just so, maybe just because of this idea that the even though the gods are residing in the US, they're kind of everywhere. And we see this little bits in like some of the later books, where there are kids that have come from like South America, some kids have come from East Asia, and all these sort of things, who are kids of demigods, because obviously the gods can still go everywhere. They're not stuck in the US. So I like the idea of them making it appear and seem more universal. So there's this whole thing. So I'm trying to think, like, how Hogwarts, even though Hogwarts is very clearly English, it didn't feel English at the same time.
Well, I mean, there's some things like as like a boy that's like as American as apple pie was like, what the heck are marks and exams all the time? This sounds awful. Oh man, there's like certain like little things that's like you have to like be aware of like those British things.
Yeah,
Like I can
yeah.
only imagine like I can't even think of examples of like the most American things other than like hamburgers and coin operated car washes in the book.
And big schools as well. This was something I brought up in my podcast recently. I'm going to see the Battle of the Labyrinth at the moment, and like in the first two chapters, it talks about the school and like the fact that they're in a huge auditorium. There's like a huge music room. I was just like, how big are American schools? Like, we don't have a music room. We have a small little room that has maybe a piano and a couple of guitars.
We did. We had a huge music room. Or we had actually not one but two gyms. We had like I was a class of I
Wow.
think 3,000, 4,000. It's like something huge and dumb.
Yeah. No, I got told that. So someone emailed me about it, and I was like, you can have up to 3,000 kids in the school. My school barely had 800.
Yeah, and like for us, it's like this huge thing, and that's kind of like when it comes down to it, that's kind of the funny thing is like they lean into it. But once they go on the road trip, I kind of almost want them to mimic those classic like wacky road trip movies a little bit, like it's a mad, 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 mad world, and like other ones like man, like Midnight Run. I'm just aging myself a little bit. Like people don't know what I'm talking about, but like you model it after that road trip in that way. If you have the aesthetic of going in the car. I'd almost like it. I think the one thing might be misremembering this from the movie, but they have like the map of the United States, but maybe they make it like almost like Greek inspired as you see them like
Oh
going
yeah, I
throughout.
remember seeing that. Yeah, that's from the film. Yeah.
Like that's the only thing I thought was interesting that maybe they could do like depending on where they are to show in the opening of the episode.
Yeah, sort of like this may slightly age me as well, and also just show what I like as a human being. In a Goofy movie, when they go
Oh
on
yeah, yeah,
their
yeah.
road
That's
trip and
that's
you see
exactly
that, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
that I'm here for. That I would be here for, admittedly. And I mean, I'm not against the road trip thing. The road trip thing, I think, can be something that is incredibly Americanized, just because when we think of road trips in general, that's
You
not
think of
something
Route
like,
66.
yeah, yeah, literally, that's road trips is a very American thing in general, and yet everyone knows what they are. Like, you don't do road trips really here in the UK or in Europe.
And especially because there's the plot thing of like they can't go in an airplane because Zeus will just shoot them right out of the sky. And
Yeah.
you have to drive that. And I feel like if they're going to do almost like the montage thing, it almost should be like little vignettes of certain things, like them eating like hot dogs or something, or like almost like a Goofy movie a little bit. Like they're showing
Yeah,
like the
I
little
would love
parts
a
of the
Goofy
adventure
movie
that.
reference. If they don't
Yeah.
do a Goofy movie reference now, I'm actually going to be disappointed.
Oh no, you're gonna see a poster for Powerline in the back.
Oh my god, I would so want that. I want that so bad now. Disney, if you are watching.
I mean, that isn't that like that's like electricity themed, so I guess they could have Zeus as technically.
Exactly. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
just something that
Oh
he
my god,
does.
at the Empire State Building, the guy who's at, obviously at the desk and stuff who lets them
It's Rick
through.
Riordan.
He's got yeah, it's Rick Riordan, and behind him is a poster of Powerline.
Oh yeah, no, exactly. Or like the book he's holding up is maybe like another Disney property book, or just something that's really silly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm here for it.
See,
I took it
that's like
slightly off topic.
no, no, you're good. You're good. Now, going a little back on topic, if we're going to get back on, is that how would you plan like the episodes? What is the start point and the finish point? Because I was looking at this beat wise. How would you even like approach it to have it in 8 episodes?
Yeah, so this was definitely something I really struggled with, and to my dismay, I didn't fully use it, but I slightly used the sort of take they did with the start of the movie. Just because there was something that they did that I thought it wasn't the way they did it was terrible, but the idea behind it wasn't bad, and that was that when Percy kills Mrs. Dodds, Grover and Chiron rush him out of that Australia way and they take him straight home. Um, and Percy goes home to Sally, and the moment she sees Grover, in my head, I'm like, she knows about Grover. She's probably met Grover in the past or something like that. Not to do with Percy's being Percy's friend, but that she knows that he is a satyr. Maybe she was warned, but like Chiron had him go and introduce himself to her, like, I'm going to be looking after Percy. I just want to keep you informed, something like that. So she recognizes him, and the first thing she does is she turns to Percy and says, what's happened, what's going on, or oh no, this is what I wrote. I put the final line for the first episode. I thought we'd have more time, and that would be the end of the first episode of like, and I was like, I like this, yes. And so, oh sorry, carry on.
No, go on. I was like,
Yeah, I don't know what it was. I like the idea of Sally having this connection to Grover, in that Grover took his role so seriously that he wanted the mortal parent to know, someone that Chiron probably has a relationship with in some form of like, probably been trying to tell her in the past, you need to let Percy come to camp, like Percy needs to come to camp. And she kept refusing. So he's gone to be a teacher there. And Grover, knowing that he's done this and hasn't told Sally, goes to see Sally without Chiron knowing that he'd done it, and like informs her about what's going on, that he's going to be looking after Percy. I don't know why. I just like the idea of this like interaction that they've had sometime in the past.
that's a lot of fun. The one that I thought of actually is ending at right after the Minotaur fight, where Percy wakes up and you have it where like he like is almost like in the big house, where it's like this normal looking house, and he gets like kind of spooked by Annabeth and seeing Grover, that he runs outside, and it's like almost like a cold cut of like he like looks out, and there's a wide shot of the camp, and it's like everything's all weird, and then it just fades to black with the first episode, because you have the emotional beat of him being heroic with killing the Minotaur, and you have him just getting there, and you establish within the next episode what Camp Half-Blood is. Like, you just pretty much, first episode should just set up kind of the whole thing, because when you have the part of, like, you know, Sally going away, you have Grover there showing, like, that big reveal, that would almost be a good idea for a good 45-minute episode, especially the beginning with Mrs. Dodds, and going from there. But I like how yours is kind of in that way, if we're going to structure it that way, because it's like you still add mystery to it. It's like trying to just get to the camp, because once you get to the camp, that's when the story really starts. So you have to like push really quickly a little bit. The story beats.
Honestly, that's kind of what I was thinking. And honestly, from my point of like the importance of Sally and Percy's relationship, I think that's why I kind of wanted a little bit more of an extra episode with Sally before she obviously disappears for a long period of time. So having this moment of her relationship with Percy, this sort of relationship that she's had with Grover, of like they're interacting in the past, her having the final line of the episode as well, and then going into the next episode of her like driving both her, Percy and Grover to Montauk, believing that like, oh no, not to Montauk, I put it that she was taking them to camp because she was
they were in Montauk, but then they were like speeding down the highway at like stupid miles an hour.
So I kind of removed the Montauk thing from this, just because like I didn't know how much time it would work to have them there and then to go to camp. So again, I sort of took what happens in the film as well, and that Montauk is missed and they're just going straight to camp. But whilst there, she's talking to Percy about his father in the car, and discussing, like, kind of not saying who he is, but kind of explaining the story, because Percy knows the story, but she's just telling him again, just like, this is why I'm taking you here, because of your father and all these sort of things, and I never wanted you to find out this way. I didn't want you to find out at all, and stuff like that, like showing her fear. And showing again the relationship between her and Grover, in that they've been in contact before to do with Percy's safety.
Especially like being able to like extend that scene would also work a little better, especially with like the relationship between Sally and Gabe, almost, where you just make it very black and white, rather than like him just being in the movie like slightly just a jerk. Like you just lean in, like it's almost like you just have to lead into the abuse a little bit, just to be like, this is X, Y, and Z, and this is why when they murder him at the end of it, no one feels bad at all.
Yeah, I will admit, I've cut Gabe out of the story entirely.
Really?
Yeah, just because in terms of the 8 episodes in general, I didn't feel like there was the time to kind of have him involved. But also, I felt that he was just such a nothing character, that there was just kind of no point to him other than being a sort of foil to Percy randomly throughout the series, throughout the book in particular.
But I feel like if you get rid of him a little bit, like you're kind of deferring or diffusing the situation with Sally, where she's the one that saves herself rather than Percy saving her. I feel like at the end, like
From Gabe's situation.
Yeah.
I do see your point there. I guess the reason I kind of just didn't have him is other than the fact that he doesn't serve any purpose as a character in general.
Oh no, he does. Like that's the funny thing is he's there to be like a conflict. Like he's like a you just need
Yeah,
someone to be turned to stone almost. Like he's just there
yeah,
as like a
it's just
catalyst.
yeah, which to me is just like in terms of the shortness of the story aspect for the episodes, but also relating to Percy and Sally's journey. I just in general, I feel like as a whole to the story and to their characters and to Sally's story, he just doesn't add any weight to it. Um, I don't know how it could be fixed to have it that she finds a way out of this bad situation other than the whole selling of his frozen statue. But I feel like there's something that could slightly be put into it. I don't know. There was a reason behind it, and I can't remember fully the reason other than I was like, he just doesn't seem to make any sense as a character to the story.
And that's like a good point to bring up, especially when it comes to it. Is like when it comes to any adaptation, like people have like this misconception that it should be beat for the book. But the problem though is when you like as I was reading this week, it's like a lot of the stuff that you have like doing like Radio Camp Half Blood and reading a chapter a week for 2 years, you realize that Rick Riordan actually has like a formula for writing a chapter, and a lot of things with like exposition and stuff is both internally in dreams. But when it comes to adaptations, you can like get that stuff across in seconds rather than paragraphs.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
there's things that you can take out and still would work within the story, or even like shorthanding things to just condense it and truncate it. Because when you're a lot of like the fight scenes can be over in like 5 to 6 seconds rather than a whole chapter about Percy on like the Gateway Arch and stuff. Like that's like how do we figure things out? And that kind of the thing is like the adaptation that we should get is one that's really it should just any adaptation, a good adaptation should be the soul of the story rather than being it beat for beat a little bit. It needs to capture what makes it fun to read.
yeah. And I think that's kind of half what I was going off of to do with Gabe as well. It's just story wise, he holds no significance to the
And he doesn't
story.
come back. I don't at all like whatsoever. Like there
Yeah,
isn't
he's
like
never
the
mentioned
redemption arc.
again after what happened. I think he's mentioned briefly in that Percy says that his mum had a past bad relationship, and I was like, okay, that's a small little reference
It's like a
here.
footnote in history. Like he's just
Yeah,
like a
yeah,
bullet
yeah.
point.
And I think if anything, the only purpose he technically served was that his scent hid Percy. But like the way in which they can do that is that by Sally holding him close, sort of like her protective nature helped protect him, put that significance on Sally instead, and that's why she kept them in the sort of I was about to say the edgier side of New York. That's not what I mean. In the
the
in the
the lower East End or wherever
the
they
Lower
are.
East End. Yeah, I don't know where I don't know New York. I don't know where they live, but like in the area that I guess is considered like the poorer side, quote unquote, of New York, because obviously they do come from a poorer background in general. Like Sally is always scrounging to make things meet, um, and isn't helped by the fact that she's having to put Percy into sort of quote unquote again special schools for his education, which will cost a pretty penny. Um, so having it be her as a person, her protective nature, her care for him being what protected him and shrouded him from the monsters. I
Oh, it's kind
think
of like what is it in Harry Potter when like
yeah,
Lily
the throwing
protects Harry?
herself.
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of that. I like the idea of her having that significance of like she is the thing that protected Percy. And even though she wasn't in like having her not be in a terrible relationship and stuff like that, I think I don't know. I didn't like it in general. I've never liked that part of the story because it just felt a bit cheap.
It serves like a very small purpose. It's almost like it's there for like drama's sake to like get the story going. Because the other rule that Gabe kind of does is he calls the cops on Percy. But then like you already have Percy pretty much quote unquote becoming a domestic terrorist when he technically accidentally
So
blows
that
up the
didn't need
Gateway
to
Arch.
exist. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
like
also when
there's
the bus blows up, like they get a
yeah.
picture of him. So like there are other cases where you don't need to have Gabe come in to kind of exasperate it. Like
Yeah.
Percy's doing it
Because then there's
himself.
the one-off joke afterwards where like he's on the news and he's like, "Thank you, Gabe," and everyone go to a store and everything's like 75% off, and he's like mad at Percy that way, and that's like the last time they interact. But yeah, no, I see your point there. That's it's one of those things. It's like that's a character that I would probably cut. a character that I probably would cut is again Krusty. Like, he serves no purpose. Even the whole quest for getting like in the water park with like Aphrodite and Hephaestus, I don't think should be there because it's like they never mention it again, and there's no weight whatsoever when it comes to it. Like, it almost should be like, I think what they did in the musical is a lot better. Like, Ares just offers them a ride, and it's like, okay, this is how we're gonna get here, and it kind of goes that way rather than having that because later on in the story you meet Aphrodite in a different way, which is almost her introduction. Just keep like in Titan's Curse, keep it that way, but everything else should just be again condensed a little bit.
Yeah, and I have that with Ares as well. Like his introduction, I bring him in chapter 5 in mind, which is when not chapter 5, episode 5, when that's when I have them kind of sort of going off on the actual journey for the quest. So they're at camp from episodes 3 and 4, they're both in camp, and then they're leaving camp in episode 5. And Ares offers them supplies and like a ride to LA. And he says the reason he's doing it is because he likes that Percy has like has some spunk to him. He's gone out, he's deliberately left camp to kind of go on this journey and stuff like that. And he's like, I respect that.
See, the one thing that I thought of when the introduction with Ares, because they go to almost a biker bar, it should literally be like Ares is like drinking something and he gets into a bar fight, and that becomes it's like a bar brawl like they have in like Sonic, or it's like every time you're in a biker bar, like Percy knocks down a bunch of people's like motorcycles, like Pee Wee's Big Adventure, and they all fall over, and it just becomes because Ares loves fighting in war. That's just like he's in his natural element, being a biker, in that
Oh,
way.
that works. That would be interesting. I'm here for that, actually.
Yeah, yeah. See, there's things like that. When it comes to mine, like when the adventure, like I think the second episode, I thought of something while we were talking about this. I think would be interesting is what if they were to reincorporate the missing chapter from the Lightning Thief as like Percy's regular day at camp that was like taken out like after the first draft that Rick Riordan put up on his website would be interesting, and have it almost the ending of the second episode for me should end when like he gets claimed, where you see the Poseidon, and it's pretty much like, oh my god, he's the son of Poseidon. Cut episode, go to credits, in that way, because you have the big event should always be like the big event of that of the of that scene should always be like something that's huge, almost like the Medusa fight or almost like the Chimera fight, where you just end right afterwards on like the next chapter almost. Though the hardest thing is I'm thinking about is like when it comes to chapters, like do they like each episode title, should they be a pun or should they just be chapter 1, 2, 3, 4?
I'd definitely be down for them being punny. I think puns would work. I think they've done that a little bit on some of the shows. Like I know on Raven's Home, they have sort of a psychic element to the title, or a comedic element, because obviously it's a family comedy show as well. Same with Diary of a Future President. They have some sort of there's relevance to the episode itself, but also something funny about it. So I think that'd be cool to do that. Unless they were doing something like the length of like the Mandalorian episodes, then maybe doing chapters.
Just like one word, the Marshal, or like the Child, or I think the Prison Break. I can't remember. Like I'm just all of them are so forgettable because they're just this is the episode and this is what we're doing. But like I accidentally vaporized my pre-algebra teacher has like such a ring to it. Like you keep that, or like you have the last episode would probably be called just the Lightning Thief or something.
Oh, that'd be cool. I like that for the final episode. I mean, oh god, I would say the final episode was the most difficult one to figure out how to do it.
See, and I also had like the moment where they actually get to L.A. should be the end of the episodes. I was thinking of like the Two Towers, of like the ending of the Two Towers when Frodo and Sam go up and you see Mordor, and like we're almost there. It's like we're almost at the end of the journey. Actually, it almost would be like The Hobbit too. It's like, well, the worst is yet to come, or like that's the hard parts. But then you get to like L.A. and then it becomes that, and it needs to still be like a race against time, almost like the 24th thing. Like maybe they even have like a visual element to show them how much time they have left, like an hourglass or something in that way.
Yeah. No, that'd be interesting having something like that just to give the visual reference to it. There's definitely something I think. Hold on, I'm just looking at my list of what I've done. Oh god, I'm just looking at it, I'm like coming up with 8 episodes was so difficult. um, there were so many things that you end up having to cut out. Like I cut out completely them meeting the gods at Olympus just because I didn't think there's a way to make time for that to happen alongside them getting to the underworld and having that sort of fight with Ares and um, then finding a way to get them back to New York and get to Olympus and then get back to camp with enough time for the reveal of Luke being the enemy and stuff like that. So the way in which I had it was just that they fight Ares and he he loses from pure dumb luck is what I put in my comments. And the items that they had, so Hades' helmet and obviously the lightning bolt, just disappear from their hands and they just get Percy gets like a sort of message from his dad through the wash of the waves. He hears like a message from his dad saying, "You have done well, my son," and that's all he hears. And he's sort of angry and resentful about the fact that he doesn't even get to go to Olympus to see his dad and return these items and prove himself to be a hero, to lead into that sort of resentment bit that he kind of understands with Luke in that final bit. Like Luke is kind of bashing the god and he's like, yeah, no, it kind of sucked that I didn't even get to meet my dad. Like they just took it and that was it. They didn't want me to come. They just took it and said thanks. And, you know, that kind of sucks. And then Luke kind of digging in, trying to get him to work and join him with Cronus. And Percy's like, wait, what? What's this about a Cronus?
Yeah, see, like when it came to mine, like the final episode is like the penultimate episode should end with them getting the bolt in the backpack with Hades. So it has like that cold part of like it's just like a cliffhanger of like, okay, what's gonna happen? So then you have the build up with like they have to explain everything. You have the escape, then you have the fight with Hades, and then you have you still kind of keep with like the book a little bit where they do have to go to like the winter solstice. Like you pretty much say that almost like in the montages, like Percy Jackson flew back. You would use the map or something, or like you'd have one scene of him like in a little airplane drinking like something blue or something. And he flies back. That's when you have the obligatory like Rick Riordan cameo where he's the security guard, and you still keep within those beats, but I feel like if you're gonna do that, because I know what they do with like the Mandalorian some season finals is that will be the episode that's like an hour long. Like that might actually be extended because the first episode of the Mandalorian this new season was 55 minutes, and the last episode for that one was almost an hour. So you kind of have those moments, but I see what you mean. Especially it's hard to have like you have all these story beats going on. Like how do you actually convey like the ending of this? I'd almost like I always have to think about when it comes to any season finale, like you have like the big reveal at the end of someone new coming up, like you see like Tyson or someone, like you get those hints, like how would you even accomplish all that stuff? That's the hard part in thinking about it.
Yeah. I think that was the thing. There are so many things that I ended up changing as well. Like even the sort of ending with Luke, I changed slightly because obviously in the books he brings out a scorpion to kill Percy. The way I changed it so that he doesn't want to kill Percy. Like even though he's gone to that dark side, he's not at that point where he can consider
Join me
killing
together.
someone.
We could rule the galaxy as bro and bro.
Yeah, sort of like that. Like what I have him do is that he just when Percy starts calling for help, he just knocks him unconscious and runs, like bolts for it. Um, because in my mind, like in my head, I'm just like he's hoping that not only can he convince Percy to join him at some point, but he can also end up convincing Annabeth. But right now, he just needs to take some time to figure out how to convince him because he thought he had when Percy was like complaining about his dad, but like he's not ready yet. He hasn't had his resentment grow. So that thing that like sort of like he's like a Palpatine and he's trying to turn Percy into Anakin.
Yeah. Did I ever tell you the story of Kronos the Wise? What?
Oh
No.
my god, literally that's kind of what I'm thinking. Like I'm wondering if he's trying to in my head I'm like I want Luke to be this sort of mastermind. Like he wants people to realize on their own but also kind of help give hints that the gods are useless idiots and serve no purpose other than their own. And he thinks the longer that Percy will see, like the more that Percy has to interact with the gods, the more he'll see that. So he's just going to bide his time. So each new time he sees Percy, he's going to kind of build up on that resentment. It's like, so I see that the gods have sent you on another deadly quest. 13 and you're already nearly dead twice. I guess Daddy Dearest doesn't think you're his favorite after all, or something like that. Like really play into it.
Yeah, and I see that's an interesting way to bring it up, especially when it comes down to like the Luke stuff, because that twist is going to be like I'd almost want it to be almost like a parlor room mystery where it's like I figured it out. You have like all the plans, but in the Lightning Thief, Percy Jackson never figures it out until Luke pretty much tells him. Like
Yeah,
it
yeah,
kept
yeah.
bothering me. It's like I was the Lightning Thief. It was like in the Rise of Skywalker. It's like I'm the spy, and I'm like, oh god, this is the worst thing ever. It's like they had to explain who the spy was. Hux, I hated that. But like you do something like that, maybe even like Percy's kind of putting the pieces together a little bit, and you have like the eureka moment. But for me, I feel like Percy needs to kind of almost be wounded, almost as a reminder, like almost like they're gonna get into a sword fight. But Luke fights, he pretty much stabs him before the fight even starts, like almost like a backstab. Like I'm not gonna kill you, but this is your one warning, almost.
Yeah. No, I can see that. And I think that's kind of why I was struggling with it. I was like, I want to show that Luke is a bad guy, but at the same time, the whole point is that his cause is sympathetic at the same time.
Well, no, I think it would be something like you would do for that is like it's perfect. Like they set it near like the lake or something, and like Luke stabs him, and he pretty much like kicks him towards the water almost. So you have almost Percy's like go into the water to heal himself as Luke gets away. He's showing mercy by doing it that way rather than
Yeah. That'd be interesting, actually.
like
Mm.
there's some things because the thing that makes it's different between Percy and Luke is that Percy knows what mercy is rather than Luke knowing what mercy is. He believes in kind of like the only time he believes in mercy is the ending of like uh the Last Olympian with like a mercy killing almost a little bit here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like but you know what happens with that. But it's like one of those things like when you have to emphasize like those fight scenes or even like morality, I almost want it to be like you don't make Luke like mini Hitler in a way of
Yeah.
like you can see his
Yeah.
point, but like he does do things more extreme and he oh my god, he's gonna be like the Kylo Ren thing a little bit where like he has
Yeah.
those moments where
Oh
like he has
God. There are going
bits
to
of
be so
rage.
many people watch the show who are going to be like simping for Luke. Just like, Luke could kill me anytime and I'd say thank you. And I'm like, guys,
Oh,
Hitler, stop it. I think that's just the thing. I think there's a way to, especially for his redemption. Like I'm one of those people that I don't feel like Luke was redeemed like at all. Um, so that's why I feel like if they want him to be redeemed, make him more sympathetic. Don't make him a killer. Don't make him torture Annabeth and then be like, it was for your own good. I'm like, bugger off. No, it wasn't.
no, like he's straight up like gaslighting her, and it's like, we're supposed to root for him, right? He's supposed to be the hero in the end. Like, not really. I mean, there's even like the parts where it's like I've even talked about it, it's like his whole like turning into like Kronos thing is really dumb. They should have kept that for the next book or something. It's like the extreme last resort instead of it just being in the Battle of the Labyrinth. But it's like again, how do we come to terms with like the villain? Like it almost needs to be just the red herring in the beginning where Ares just seems like the person, but then maybe even at the end like you hard cut to like Luke pretty much talking to Kronos or something. You just have like the bigger threat. I don't. It's one of those things.
Yeah, there's definitely something. I think the main thing, just in terms of Luke, is building up his relationship with Percy and with Annabeth as well, having that so we can also see her conflict later on of like not believing that he is the bad guy. Because I know that's the thing that everyone's like, oh, it's so dumb she thinks that. And I'm like, he was basically the only person who raised her.
Yeah, and he's straight up like gaslighting her entire life. The
Yeah,
most.
she was like 7 when he and Talia found her, and then she's been around him ever since, and she's like what 12 now. So that's
Mm-hmm.
I can't do
Well, I
math.
mean,
Five
see, the
years.
main concern that I have is like again going back to my notes. Is like it's gonna be avoidable, or not even gonna be avoidable. It's gonna be inevitable at this point. It's like you're gonna have like the three-way love triangle, which they're gonna either
Oh my
lean into,
god.
which they writers' room. I'm looking at you right now. Don't do it. It's not worth it.
And writer's room again. I know Rick is involved, but also this is to you, Rick, as well. Also, because you slightly did this in the book, so please don't. Do not have the mentioning of love between Annabeth and Luke. She can have a crush on him because what teenager hasn't got a crush on a random older actor that they see in every film? but don't have him ask her if she loves him, because it comes across just a teeny tiny bit creepy, considering he's in his 20s and she is 15. That is all.
Man, that's your Fran talk.
That is my friend. Thank you for coming to my Fran talk. Or as I think I called it once in my podcast, thank you for coming to my Tyson talk.
Yeah, that's a good one too. Yeah, I mean, there's like that thing. It's like when you come down to like you look at like, the plot themes. The other thing that I probably try to get a lot away from is actually dreams and visions, because it's so exorbitant in the first book that it needs to be like you need to get exposition much differently. I mean, they have like iris messages, but literally every chapter that Percy falls asleep, he has to have a vision to be almost spoons fed this plot. Like, I love it. It's so good. Whereas, like, you can have that through characters, or even, like, maybe even moments where you have to go back to camp a little bit. It's like, back on the ranch a little bit, where they do more iris messages or getting exposition that way. Or you do it very sparingly, and you still have, like, that underlying, like, themes and mysteries preserved.
Yeah. I think that's definitely one thing. Like, I would cut nearly all of them out, admittedly. Throughout the whole series, I hate the dream sequences. Honestly, that's my biggest pet peeve that I've had about the series as a whole.
Unless they're like the really important ones, like you like lightsabers, you keep them sparingly and you use them when they need to be used rather than every 2 seconds.
Like the ones where Kronos is speaking to Percy, those are the only ones that need to be there. Like nothing else does. Like I'm reading Battle of the Labyrinth at the moment, and the whole thing they've got with like the Daedalus story of like him in his workshop. I'm like, thank you for spoiling the entire story.
Well, I mean, you could do that almost as like the flashback sequence where he tells like the story. Like they zoom in into like Daedalus's eye, and you see like his whole myth real quickly, or something. And also,
he is like a magical mechanic. He could just make a little mini projector showing his mind and his memories. Like that's how genius he is. Having that story, just like considering the first flashback of it is in like chapter 4, showing Daedalus's story. I'm like, you don't know at this point, but it starts to spoil everything that you learn in that book, because you've already learned it and you can figure it out. Like they can just be cut. There are things like that I think can be cut from the series.
The one note that I actually have, that's something that I was like thinking about, I think people need to be aware of, is they really need to do the job properly of explaining the myths a little bit, because the problem though is it's supposed to be infotainment. It's supposed to be a series about teaching Greek mythology, rather than when people read Percy Jackson, there's a misconception that you don't learn anything about Greek mythology, but it does a really, really good job of doing that. And I still want them to kind of do like that infotainment thing of being able to explain myths, rather than it's just, look at all these cool monsters and stuff. Like, you need to like explain everything. I feel like that needs to be, that's why I love having Annabeth there when she does her exposition trying to explain to Percy, who is pretty much a dummy when it comes to all that stuff, and she's the one that points the obvious out.
Yeah, and I'm there for that, because that, like, the infotainment thing I think is really useful. The thing that I would change is some of the myth changes that the books do make. I'd rather they just don't have those myths involved if they're going to really drastically change the story. Like, there's one complaint that I've always had, is how they made Medusa a girlfriend of Poseidon and stuff like that. Like, considering all the different interpretations that come from that myth, and also the horrible things that did happen to her, and making her a villain and all these sort of things. I've never been a fan of just reducing her to a jealous ex, which is sort of how it comes across here and there, and slightly in the chapters that she's introduced in. I think that could be done a little bit better if Medusa is going to be kept in. Sort of like, that cringe moment that they have in the film, is like, I used to date your daddy, and I was like, I hate this so much. Why? That's kind of like, even that has that feeling in the books a little bit, even though it's obviously that dialogue never happens. You get the sort of undertone of like this bitterness about that relationship, and like, no, please don't.
See, if they're gonna do like the Medusa fight, that's out of every scene in the whole adaptation, that's the one that I want to see, is the Medusa fight, but model it almost after like Clash of the Titans a little bit, and you just have like that cleverness, but at the same time, when it comes to the motivation, maybe it's just like very ambiguous. It's like, she's doing her thing because it's like an instinct to turn things into stone, or maybe it's just like just another roadblock they get into. But keeping the myths kind of like almost like the Brothers Grimm, like keeping them as true to the original version as possible would be a much better thing to do than just being they need this for like plot convenience. Again, if we go back to the Krusty thing, I'm like, I don't understand this whole thing about like water beds and stuff, and because some of them like you can take like the liberty with because you have to like the one thing about Percy Jackson that I also like is that they have like the Americana twist on a lot of the myths. Like again, like the Lotus Casino, it's a casino where it's like pretty much like super Chuck E. Cheese that no one wants to leave, but that's kind of the charm of it, and I feel like you still need to like lean into a little bit, but maybe again we talked about this with adaptations. You have to preserve the original spirit of the story rather than it changing it for a plot convenience sake.
Mm. No, I totally agree. I think that's just something. Some of the myths I think could very easily be un-Americanized because some of them were Americanized needlessly, which I feel kind of takes the mysticism out of some of them in some areas. So that whole thing, like so many people fan cast the idea of Aphrodite when she does come in, of being played by multiple actresses because the idea of beauty is
Eye of the beholder, beauty in the eye is different.
And I would love that. I would love that so much because not only would it give this attention that Aphrodite is not, because the whole thing is that in the books we only ever see Aphrodite as a beautiful blonde white woman. Like that's the only vision we ever really see of Aphrodite in the books. There's kind of no other interpretation of her, but I think it'd be interesting to have moments of her of like seeing a plus size woman shown as Aphrodite, having a woman of color, having even maybe sort of a more androgynous look as well for like
or you just get David Bowie
appears. Oh my gosh,
I mean, yes. I guess you can't get David Bowie, but
well yeah you can't someone like David Bowie. Someone like David Bowie.
I do agree with like a lot of that, especially when it comes to that, because we're dealing with the gods and you're dealing with magic. That's why, again, when it comes to casting, that's when you get like your A-listers to be the gods rather than them being the kids, because you can play around with it, because when it comes to being a god, like they're both the world's biggest a-holes, but also at the same time you can sympathize with them when they're like completely flawed people in many ways.
Oh, definitely. I think that's the thing about them as well, just like, and I think this is the thing, like so many fan casts that I do see, like of the gods in particular, and the justification people put behind them as well, just like they think the only people who should betray the gods are white, and the justification behind that is because the gods are from Greece. And I'm like,
no. Well, they take on different personas depending on where they are.
Yeah, and in New York, which is obviously where they're like, it is. What is it called? A melting pot?
I'm about to say that's the exact word. I'm not going to say. If I was going to do like some American history, the word that we would use is, but America's a melting pot of cultures. And this is okay. Wait, this is where you see like the Ellis Island, like people coming off the boat.
yeah, and it's something like that. Like that's always confused me, and that's why I've always wanted like in the books. Admittedly, there's not really much variety with the images of the gods, which is what I really hope the casting of it really changes that up. That the gods are representing America, and America is of very different cultures and people, and they should visually portray that as well. This went so off topic by accident.
No, I think that's an important thing to talk about, because the one thing that I always think about especially when it comes to actors, is that they can give different performances to the gods, and you can write something down, but there's a difference between writing it down and actually speaking it. That's the Star Wars thing. It's like you can write it down, but it might not sound good. But you have like, when it comes down to it, I think the core aspect is like getting like a very honest depiction of those characters that fits within them. Like Percy isn't gonna like behead someone. Like you have to have like that thing. It's like when it comes to like streaming shows, yes, you have the ability now of not really having to worry about like ratings, I guess. I mean, yes, because it's Disney, they're gonna keep it more family friendly, but at the same time, you can play around with a lot of things because you're not pretty much in like this, streaming servers are so much different because they're not in this one particular, like they have to be this way or this. You can have them at different lengths. You can have them do wacky things. But at the end of the day, it's one of those things. It's like the people that they get to make the adaptation for this is going to be an interesting thing. And the people, making this whole production is a huge team effort, especially like recently, the Walt Disney Company is like, we're going to focus a lot more on our streaming shows and our streaming platform because movie theaters are currently deado. So they might be putting more money. And I always think about like, if you don't believe me that they'll probably get good people, look at like most commercials right now. They're getting like a bunch of these A-list celebrities for like D-list commercials because all of them got to work. So that means, hey, we have this idea for this streaming show. Pretty much, Morgan Freeman, do you want to be on it? Why, yes, I do. I want to be Zeus.
Oh my god, him as Zeus would be amazing. That'd be epic. I'm here for it. Give me it. Give me.
Percy, did you take my ball? I can't do a Morgan Freeman impression, but
Yeah, I think that's the thing. It's going to be interesting, firstly, to see how they go with the story, because obviously Rick is involved with the writing of the script as well, and I don't know who else will be, because obviously TV shows, you have multiple writers more often than not for episodes, so we don't know yet who's going to be involved, but I'm intrigued as to whether or not it could be new authors, new writers, or season writers who may be part of Disney Channel in general,
staff writers.
Yeah. And so I'm just intrigued to see how they're going to go about with it and how that collaboration is going to lead to. Maybe there'll be some changes in it, like things that, because that's always the thing, like authors who are involved with projects and stuff, they can nearly always change something that in the past they're not a fan of it as much now. Like when they look back on the book, I'm like, oh, I wrote that in, but you know what? I don't like that anymore. I've changed my opinion. So, and kind of changing that to how they see it and how they want that now.
Like a really good example of this is actually Series of Unfortunate Events, where like Daniel Handler, I'm looking at this, comparing it to this, is like Daniel Handler, like, okay, maybe I didn't know what the F I was doing for a bunch of my plots, so I'm going to help streamline this, but also at the same time, I'm going to be taking out things that I didn't really like, or maybe like jokes like, maybe we shouldn't do this. And the way that he built his writer's room was like they pretty much stayed at his house and he made them like martinis and stuff. And they figured out what makes Series of Unfortunate Events. This is why, like, when I think of like Game of Thrones, when they got up to about season 4 or 5, like George R. R. Martin was working really heavily within those writing rooms, and he wrote like some episodes. But then they had like their fallout, and then you watch the other seasons, and you have like just the crash and burn, like Hindenburg level of stuff. And it's like I'm interested to see like what Rick Riordan's going to be doing, especially in terms of like his involvement with the series. Is it going to be like the George R. R. Martin thing where like he has to have final approval on certain things and like really working heavily? Or is it going to be something like the Daniel Handler thing where he is an executive producer and he's helping like outline the story in this way, but he's like being very laissez-faire a little bit on the story and we see where it goes? Like that's the thing that I'm interested to see when it comes to Rick's role, especially they have the his production company now is
Mytho Magic Inc. Mytho Magic Inc. Loved that so much.
Now that he has like a production company, that means he probably has a lot more involvement, especially when it comes to a lot of that stuff. So I'm interested to see what's going to be happening with that, because it's always fascinating thinking about seasons, and especially like when it comes to everything, my biggest fear of everything is one season to the next. Like when it comes to like any show, what are they going to change, and especially how they're going to film it. If they're going to have kid actors, are they going to shoot them back to back to back, or is it going to be something where they have to figure out and compromise about like, yeah, they're going to keep aging up a little bit and that's okay.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if it's going to be, because I know with obviously the Harry Potter films, they got actors that were slightly younger than the age of the characters. Like I think, what was it, Daniel Radcliffe had only just turned 11 when they started filming for Harry Potter or something like that. So they were all around 10, 11 years old, and they were making the films just when they were just before that 11 years or something like that. So I wonder if they'll do something like that, like they'll get actors who are around 11 years old maybe, so they're kind of before the age of the first series.
Now
so
you get them as like babies, and like you instead of de-aging them up, like you like deep fake them to be a little little older.
Oh my gosh, imagine. That'd be terrifying. But something like that. So maybe they'll get like actors who are maybe a year or two younger than the age of like Percy and Annabeth and stuff. So actors who are maybe 10 or 11. So that even if there's a year's, like maybe a year after the first series comes out and the second one is going through, they'd be filming throughout that point. So they'd maybe be about 12, maybe 13 at that point. So it slightly goes in time with it.
It's also going to be interesting, especially like now that he has his production company. Are they going to be doing more of the Pantheon? Because they are doing the Kane Chronicles as movies, but that's for Netflix. And like, if I know anything about Netflix and Disney, is that they don't like working together. If we look at like the Marvel, like the Defenders, like there's not going to be a crossover. Like that's like I'm looking at everyone. There probably won't be because rights are a nasty business. So we'll see what's going to be happening with that, because out of all of them, you can disattach that story compared to like Heroes of Olympus, Magnus Chase, and
Yeah, those are
Trials
the
of
only ones
Apollo.
that can't. I did a video I did a video about that on my channel recently for anyone who's interested in learning a little bit about that.
So there's going to be a link down below, so check that out. That was actually a really fun video. It's something to bring up because it's, we talk about production, and sometimes things can be really wacky. And, there's the weird thing about Percy Jackson is that even though it isn't like you would call like a major, property, because I can't get like Camp Half-Blood shirts that aren't licensed, which I'm really excited if there's going to be any licensing stuff. And if I know Disney, oh man, I'm going to be drinking out of my Camp Half-Blood mug. I'm going to be having so much fun, like
Oh,
having
going
my
to the
shirts.
Disney store will be amazing.
Oh yeah, no, because it's all like, what's your cabin? There's going to be like just huge sections of like
Oh my
cabin
gosh.
stuff. Let's see, like
Yeah.
Disney's just like, we're going to get our money back somehow.
Yeah. And then they're going to
But
sue everyone who's making merchandise.
at least they'll know it's kind of high quality a little
Yeah.
bit. Yeah. But what was I going to say? Oh, wow, I totally forgot what was I going to say. Oh, yeah, when it comes to, like, adaptations, we just have to figure out what's the right balance of this, especially, like, when it comes down to it. Like, what are they going to do with, like, the other series? And in the end, we have to go on and see what's going to be happening, because I'm really excited. And it's one of those things, like, I've already had this in my life. Like, this is already a pattern. This will be the third one, but it's like, bad movies, good TV shows, series of unfortunate events, The Golden Compass, and hopefully Percy Jackson.
hmm Oh yeah. And hopefully also Avatar: The Last Airbender. Please, gods, please.
We'll see.
I'm letting hope guide me. I'm hoping
that's
against all hope. But if not,
hey,
there are a
remember
couple
what
of fan creators out there which are doing fantastic jobs. So that's something.
just remember, the last thing in Pandora's jar was hope. Oh no, everyone's
Exactly.
left. Oh, thank God, there's still hope left. And then you see off in the distance, you just see a Fire Nation ship, and this has M. Night Shyamalan on it. Soon I'm gonna come back. Oh no. Oh no, he's gonna direct with like the blue spirit mask on, so no one
Oh
knows
my
that it's
gosh.
him. Oh no.
Oh no. Oh
I think that
gosh.
kind of concludes what we've been doing today. I think we're so off the rails right now. We've entered into the spirit realm and gone to Avatar a little bit.
Oh yeah. And that will be something that'll probably come on my channel in the future. Where me and Zach talk about the adaptation there.
Fran, thank you so much for coming here and talking about Percy Jackson, talking about adaptations. It was a lot of fun. Where can they find you and all your material and all your amazing content?
Brilliant. Thank you. I'm really glad to have come for this. This was a lot of fun. For anyone who is interested in Avatar: The Last Airbender, The Legend of Korra, and the Kyoshi novels, you can find my channel, A Healthy Dose of Fran, by searching A Healthy Dose of Fran or A Dose of Fran, because I tag that as well, so you have no choice but to find me. And I have videos that come out every Sunday and occasionally on a Wednesday if I'm feeling a little bit cheeky. And you can find me on my social media at A Dose of Fran on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, where I occasionally post.
Yes, thank you so much for coming again. We'll hopefully have you on into the future. We'll talk about other things. Like, there's a lot of things we could easily talk about.
Oh
just
yeah,
random things.
lots of
but-
content.
Oh, yeah, no, lots of content. But if you want to find me, you can find me on social media at Suda41. If you haven't had a chance, maybe consider subscribing down below. This is the types of content that I like to make. I recently had a video where I talked about Mistborn and like that adaptation, so that was a lot of fun. But if you enjoyed this, please support the channel. What do you guys think about like a Percy Jackson show? I know I haven't really talked about Percy Jackson on this channel but I'm gonna start doing a little more now. Just talk about little things. But it's always interesting to talk about this. What would you guys like to see with like a Disney Plus adaptation? What are scenes that you absolutely cannot wait to see on the big screen, or changes that you wish that you could make and pretty much be a part of that writer's room? Well, thank you all so much, and like always, may your food and drink ever be tasteful, and may your books be filled with fantasy and adventure. Bye, everyone. See ya.
Bye.